Before we get to the whiny moderates in the Republican Party and their really excess influence on the freshmen and the conservatives in the Republican body there's one other person I'm going to want you to hear from. It's a short clip, but it's a brilliant clip of Margaret Thatcher. Then we'll get to the Lilliputians who are attacking you and me. We'll be right back. By the way, these NFL players are doing themselves no good comparing themselves to slaves. I mean, it's just pathetic. I believe the lowest wage is around $300,000 with benefits, and according to Obama, you're in the top 1%. But that aside, people saying it like Adrian Peterson, what's he worth, 20 million, 30, 40, 50? I don't know. It's like people who throw around the word Nazi all the time. You understand what that means? Throw around the word slavery. You actually understand what that means, Mr. Peterson? I mean, these folks, athletes, who I admire enormously, they're worshipped. They're not treated like slaves. I mean, good Lord. All right, before we get to the great new leaders in the Republican House, I want you to hear a little bit from Margaret Thatcher. I want to give a hat tip to National Review Online. This is on YouTube. In the House of Commons, November 22, 1990, she's responding to the head of the Liberal Party, who's talking about the great gap between the rich and the poor since she became prime minister. And I want you to listen, because Reagan was a genius at this too, how they take the left's propaganda and language and turn it on them, which Mr. Boehner, Cantor, and McCarthy are absolutely incapable of. Instead, they sit there and they shiver. Oh, what are we going to do? Here's Margaret Thatcher 21 years ago. Cut one, go.
Mr. Speaker, all levels of income are better off than they were in 1979. But what the honourable member is saying is that he would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That way you will never create the wealth for better social services that we have. And what a policy! Yes, he would rather have the poor poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That is a liberal policy. Yes, it came out, he didn't intend it to, but he did. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
The Prime Minister is aware that I detest every single one of her domestic policies, and I've never hid that.
And I think that the honourable gentleman knows that I have the same contempt for his socialist policies as the people of East Europe who have experienced it have it for theirs. I think I must have hit the right nail on the head when I pointed out that the logic of those policies are they'd rather have the poor poorer. Once they start to talk about the gap, they'd rather the gap was that. Down here. That. Not that. But that. So long as the gap is smaller, so long as the gap is smaller, they'd rather have the poor poorer. You do not create wealth and opportunity that way. You do not create a property-owning democracy that way.
Boy, do we lack intelligent spokesmen in the Republican leadership. All we get are these hair-dried, platitudinous politicians who've been around forever. Honest to God. So I turn to the Daily Caller, our friend Jonathan Strong. GOP leaders and much of the mainline party caucus that voted for a 3-week continuing resolution are fuming at the 54 conservative Republicans who voted no and the right-wing activists who cheered them on. Look how they describe us. We're not constitutionalists. We're not fiscally responsible citizens. We're right-wing activists. And by the way, if the GOP leaders are fuming at 54 conservative Republicans, what does that make those GOP leaders, if not conservative? Something less. Many saw the move by conservatives, galvanized by a closed-door speech by former GOP conference chairman Representative Mike Pence, as a pointless protest vote that weakened House Speaker John Boehner's hand in negotiations with top Democrats on spending bills. Look how they've twisted it. Let me explain something to the Daily Caller. Let me explain something to Mr. Boehner. You've weakened yourself. You weakened your own hand. You weakened the Republican Party. But more importantly, you're undermining conservative principles in the case we need to make. Why do you think Obama's not involved in negotiating with you, Mr. Boehner? Why do you think Mr. Reid could care less what you have to say? Because you've now backed yourself into a corner. They know your recent $6 billion in cuts. They know them very well because those were the cuts they offered. And same with the $4 billion before that. Those $10 billion in cuts, for the most part, were offered by the liberal Democrats. Now what are you going to do? And if there is, in fact, a shutdown in government, you have not spent the last 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks communicating to the American people like Ronald Reagan urged back in 1977 that conservative Republicans must do if they're going to win the day. You have not explained the perils that we faced. You have not explained what the Democrats have done to the budget process. You have not explained the $105 billion. You have not explained why you need to take a more principled, and not just principled, a more practical position than the one you've taken thus far. I don't know what alternatives you have left. I don't know what options you have left. I don't know what your strategy is. But I can tell you that the left sees weakness, and they see correctly. Nobody's boxed you into this corner but yourself. Now let's hear Jack Kingston, a Georgia Republican, who says a lot of good things but always winds up voting with Mr. Boehner. I wonder why that is. Kingston says it weakened Boehner. If he walked into a meeting with Senator Reid and he said, my party's unified, and we're willing to go 3 more weeks, and that's it, unity is a strength in this town, and it shows how we're not united. So I do think there was a weakness on that. Let me explain something to you, Mr. Kingston. They already know Mr. Boehner's weak, and what those 54 Republicans showed is that there's strength, that there's a growing rebellion against Boehner's weakness, and yours, apparently. Those 54 Republicans are serious about what they campaigned on. Those 54 Republicans represent the vast majority of the American people. As Reagan said, not a cult, but a majority. Some of you have been up there on Capitol Hill way too long, preaching conservatism, but voting differently. Some of you have been part of the problem, but the problem has to stop, and it has to stop now. Let me go on with the Daily Caller, because these are leaks, these are comments. The speaker wants his team to get out there, talk to the media, trash these conservatives. And by the way, when they're trashing those 54 conservatives, they're trashing you and me and the Tea Party and the Reaganites, whatever party. The episode provoked furious anger from advocates for the party's line, with GOP whip Kevin McCarthy angrily confronting Pence in a members-only meeting before the vote. Who the hell is Kevin McCarthy? Oh, I know he's the number 3 guy in the... Has he done something remarkable, or has he shown some leadership that I've missed somewhere? Or was he able to work the system to become the number 3 guy? I mean, I never heard of the guy before. One GOP aide unloaded on the conservatives. Listen to this. So it's now we, the conservatives, like the reptile house at the zoo. Something's wrong with you and me. We, the people who put these bums in office. We, the people who gave them their majority. Now they spit on us. Now they attack us in the media. Well, let's hear what this GOP aide had to say. And he must be a prominent aide, or I'm sure the Daily Caller wouldn't be quoting him anonymously. These people aren't thinking clearly. That's you. Their logic doesn't pan out. They have no plan. What concessions were they going to get if it failed? They were going to shut down the federal government over Planned Parenthood, the source said. It's totally reactionary. These people get elected to lead. Instead, they got jerked around by the political equivalent of music critics. Oh, now you're music critics. If these people knew anything about governing, they'd be in Congress, not lobbing bombs from the cheap seats and sending out fundraising emails. This is how they view you in the corridors of the House of Representatives with the new Republican majority. Listen to what this punk, who you're paying, who is nameless in this article because he's gutless, listen to what he thinks of you. What is our plan, you little jerk? I'll tell you our plan. It's right there in the Constitution. I'll tell you our plan. You're such a fool. You're already caught up in the, what are we going to do if the government shut down? Rather than having spent months explaining to the American people that Obama is shutting down the government. Yes, he is. And rather than that, also explaining to the American people what that means. It does not mean Social Security checks will stop. It does not mean the Border Patrol will be pulled off the border. It does not mean the military will be without bullets. It does not mean the FBI goes on. It means non-essential services will be stopped. You've not explained to the American people the massive spending that's occurred in the last 24 months. You guys are weak. You're reactionary. You're defensive. You're unprincipled. What exactly are you? What is somebody who talks this way? He's a hack. They bought and paid for a hack. The aide offered contempt for Pence in particular. Pence is running for governor and has to get to her primary. So his position is about genuine as a $10 Gucci handbag on Sunset Boulevard. I think the Daily Caller had an obligation to reveal this individual's name when he's throwing mud balls like that. I just mentioned that to Jonathan Strong. It's inappropriate to report things this way where a guy's pulling out his stiletto and nobody knows who he is. So Pence is running for governor, so his position, you see, is poisoned. Meanwhile, all the other people in the House of Representatives who are going to run for re-election, I assume Mr. Boehner's one of them, I assume Mr. Cantor's one of them, I assume what's-his-name McCarthy's one of them, they're acting out of principle, you see, because they're not interested in re-election, are they? No, only Pence is running for another office. These guys aren't interested in re-election at all. Their motives are absolutely pure. Meanwhile, we conservatives, our motives are hell. I'm going to go on with this, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because we must. Because we must. We're going to clean out the swamp here. We're going to deal with the weak underbelly, whether they like it or not. You guys are going to learn to hate me and hate us even more when you're out on your asses looking for a job and can't find one. With the almost 10% unemployed and the almost 20% underemployed and unemployed. You're going to learn to hate me and hate the tens of millions of people who put you in office because we can drag you the hell out of office, too. You're not going to talk to us this way and get away with it. I can tell you that right now. I don't care what the other talk hosts are all about. I don't care about their guests. I don't care about their meetings. I don't care. None of that matters to me. None of it. They'll eventually follow me. They usually do. Up on the Drudge Report, the Drudge Report has a link to our friends Terry Jeffrey at cnsnews.com. The national debt jumped by $72 billion on Tuesday. Now listen to this. $72 billion on Tuesday, even as the Republican-led House of Representatives passed a continuing resolution to fund the government for just 3 weeks that will cut $6 billion from government spending. Jeffrey writes, if Congress were to cut $6 billion every 3 weeks for the next 36 weeks, it would manage to save between now and late November as much money as the Treasury added to the nation's net debt during just the business hours on Tuesday, March 15th. What a brave step these boys and girls are taking up there. Why don't we appreciate all that they're doing? What else can they do? When they ran for office and asked for your vote, did they say, what else can we do? We can't waive the rule. We can't do this. We can't. I don't want can'ts and won't and don'ts. We want yes. We'll lead the charge. We'll do the best we can. This is a non-starter, folks. This is a non-starter. And as my buddy David Limbaugh wrote yesterday in his excellent column, they're going to shut this government down anyway. That's Obama's plan. That's Reid's plan. And our guys, quote-unquote, they're not ready for it. They don't know what the hell to do. They're busy attacking conservatives and Tea Party activists.